Have you ever wondered why the person you feel in your heart so deeply still hasn't appeared in your life yet, even though everything inside you feels ready, even though your soul feels prepared, even though your prayers have been whispered in silence night after night, and sometimes you begin to question whether something is wrong with you or whether maybe God has forgotten your story? But what if the delay you are experiencing right now is not rejection at all? What if the silence is not absence? What if the waiting itself is the evidence that something sacred is being carefully arranged behind the scenes? Because there are moments in life when heaven does its most powerful work quietly, when nothing seems to move, when nothing seems to change, when doors remain closed, and when your heart keeps asking why. But God is not delaying your love story to deny you. He is delaying it to protect you, to prepare you, and to align two journeys that were never meant to meet too early, because sometimes meeting too soon can destroy what was meant to last forever. And what you call delay, God calls positioning. What you call silence, God calls preparation. What you call loneliness, God calls protection. And the truth is, there are things happening right now in your life that you cannot see yet, but they are shaping the exact version of you that your future partner has been praying for. Just like somewhere out there someone is being shaped into the exact answer to the prayers you have whispered when no one else was listening. And even though you cannot see them yet, even though you cannot hear their voice yet, even though your paths have not crossed yet, something inside your spirit already recognizes that this story is real, because divine love stories never begin the moment two people meet. They begin long before that, in unseen places, in quiet transformations, in invisible timing, where God carefully removes what is temporary so He can prepare what is eternal. And maybe that is why certain relationships in your past didn't work, not because you were unworthy, not because you were unlovable, but because they were never meant to walk with you into the future God is preparing. And sometimes protection feels like disappointment, sometimes alignment feels like delay, sometimes destiny feels like silence. But what if every closed door you experienced was actually a shield? What if every goodbye was actually direction? What if every season of waiting was actually positioning you closer and closer to someone who is also walking through their own preparation season right now? Someone who has also asked God questions, someone who has also wondered why things haven't happened yet, someone who is also learning patience, strength, faith, and trust at the exact same time as you, because divine timing does not operate randomly. It moves with intention, it moves with precision, it moves with purpose. And right now, even if you cannot feel it, everything is aligning in ways your human understanding cannot yet see, because the love story God writes is never rushed, it is never careless, it is never accidental, it is intentional, protected, and designed to arrive at the moment when both hearts are ready, not just emotionally but spiritually, mentally, and purposefully ready to recognize each other, not as coincidence but as confirmation. And maybe the reason your story has not started yet is because God is still writing the most important chapters of both of your lives separately, so that when your paths finally cross, you won't meet as incomplete people searching for rescue, but as prepared souls ready for partnership, ready for purpose, ready for something deeper than attraction, ready for something stronger than timing, ready for something eternal that cannot be shaken by temporary storms. Because when God aligns a love story, He does not just bring two people together, He aligns their healing, their growth, their faith, their purpose, and their future in ways that only make sense when you finally look back and realize that every delay was actually direction, and every silence was actually preparation, and every moment of waiting was actually proof that something sacred was being protected for you this entire time. There are nights when the silence feels louder than your prayers and you begin to wonder if heaven somehow skipped your name when love was being assigned, but what you cannot see yet is that heaven never forgets a name that it personally writes into a destiny, and right now, even while you question the timing of your story, God is moving pieces that your eyes cannot track and arranging moments you cannot predict, because the love meant for you is not random. It is intentional and protected and prepared with care so deep that every delay you have felt was actually a shield standing between your heart and something that would have broken it too early. And sometimes the reason nothing worked before is not because you were too much or not enough, but because you were too important to be placed in the wrong hands. And what feels like waiting is often divine protection disguised as silence, because real love sent by God is never rushed, it is revealed at the moment your spirit is ready to recognize it, and your future partner is ready to carry it, and your life is ready to sustain it. And while you thought you were simply moving through ordinary days, God was quietly aligning two timelines, two healing journeys, two prayers whispered in different places at different times that were always meant to meet in one unforgettable moment. And even now, somewhere there is someone whose heart has already begun preparing space for you without knowing your face, whose life is being shaped by lessons they do not yet understand, so that when they finally stand in front of you, they will not arrive confused or careless, but ready and steady and intentional. And the truth is that many people mistake delay for absence, but heaven never confuses preparation with rejection, because when something sacred is being built, it is built slowly, carefully, and purposefully. And the love story written for you was never meant to begin in chaos. It was meant to begin in clarity and peace and certainty, so that when it finally arrives, you will not question whether it is real. You will recognize it immediately, because something inside you will feel calm instead of anxious, secure instead of uncertain, understood instead of overlooked. And that kind of love cannot be forced into existence early. It must be developed through seasons you did not choose, but seasons that still shaped you into the person who could finally receive it. And maybe you did not realize it at the time, but every disappointment you survived strengthened your ability to recognize the difference between temporary attention and lasting commitment. Every goodbye you never expected trained your heart to value loyalty. Every unanswered prayer taught your spirit patience, and every lonely moment created deeper space inside you for the right person to one day enter without competition from confusion or fear, because the love God is preparing for you is not meant to arrive while you are still learning how to survive heartbreak. It is meant to arrive when you are strong enough to protect peace together. And sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that if things had happened earlier, they would not have lasted longer, because timing protects purpose and purpose protects love. And that is why your story is unfolding differently than others around you, because comparison cannot measure destiny, and what is being built in your life right now cannot be rushed without risking everything that makes it meaningful and permanent. And there are moments when you may feel forgotten while watching others celebrate engagements, weddings, relationships, milestones that you secretly hoped would already be part of your own life. But what you do not see behind the scenes is how carefully your future is being arranged, with details too precise to be random and connections too meaningful to be temporary, because somewhere your future partner is also wondering why certain doors never opened for them and why certain relationships never stayed, and they do not yet realize that every closed door was guiding them closer to you, just as every closed door was guiding you closer to them. And one day, when your paths finally cross, both of you will recognize that the waiting was never empty, it was preparation. And that realization will turn your past frustrations into gratitude, because you will finally understand that nothing was late, everything was right on time and right now, even if your heart sometimes questions the Silence. Heaven is still writing your story line by line. Moment by moment, lesson by lesson, and the chapter you are living in today is not the conclusion, it is the preparation before the arrival. And when the right person finally walks into your life, they will not bring confusion, they will bring confirmation, they will not bring pressure, they will bring peace, they will not bring uncertainty, they will bring clarity. And suddenly all the nights you wondered why things were not working before will begin to make sense, because you will realize that love delayed is often love protected, and love protected is love preserved for the exact moment it can grow, without fear, without instability, without interruption. And maybe even tonight there is a prayer being spoken somewhere by someone who does not yet know your name, but whose heart is already being guided toward yours. And maybe even now God is aligning conversations that have not happened yet, meetings that have not occurred yet, decisions that have not been made yet but are already shaping the moment your lives will finally intersect. And when that day comes, you will look back at this season not as a time when nothing was happening, but as a time when everything important was quietly being prepared just for you. And there is something else happening right now that you cannot see, but heaven can clearly see, because while you are wondering why the connection hasn't appeared yet, why the messages haven't started yet, why the relationship you imagined hasn't unfolded yet, God is quietly working on both hearts at the same time, shaping your story from two different directions, so that when the moment finally arrives it does not feel rushed or confusing or fragile, but instead feels unmistakably right, deeply peaceful, and spiritually aligned in a way that makes you realize this was never about delay at all, it was about preparation, because the kind of love that God writes is never built on convenience, it is built on timing that protects you from the wrong doors and leads you step by step toward the one person who is also being prepared for you even now. And maybe they are learning patience in a season where everything feels slow. Maybe they are healing from a chapter that almost convinced them to stop believing in real love. Maybe they are growing closer to God in ways they never expected, and maybe they are praying for something they cannot yet describe, but their spirit already recognizes you in that prayer even before your names are spoken in the same sentence on earth. And that is why some days you feel a strange calm instead of fear when you think about your future relationship, because your spirit already senses that something sacred is being arranged behind the scenes. You have to understand that divine alignment never happens loudly, it happens quietly, almost invisibly, like roots growing underground before a tree becomes visible above the surface. And right now God is strengthening the roots of your future connection so that when your lives finally intersect, the relationship does not collapse under pressure but stands strong through seasons, storms, misunderstandings, distance, and time itself, because the love that is meant for you is not temporary excitement, it is lasting partnership. It is the kind of connection where both hearts recognize each other not just emotionally but spiritually, and this kind of recognition takes preparation that cannot be rushed no matter how ready you feel today. There are moments when you think you missed your chance, or you think maybe the timing passed you by, or maybe you start comparing your story to everyone else's story and wonder why theirs seems to be moving faster than yours. But comparison hides the truth that your journey is being written with details that are different on purpose, because God is not repeating someone else's timeline in your life. He is designing a path that protects your heart from what would not last and guides you toward what will stay. And even when nothing seems to be changing on the outside, there are invisible adjustments happening that you will only understand later when you look back and realize how many wrong turns you were gently redirected away from without even knowing it. Sometimes what feels like silence is actually protection. Sometimes what feels like waiting is actually positioning. And sometimes what feels like uncertainty is actually the space God uses to prepare both of you so that when your paths finally cross there is clarity instead of confusion and peace instead of pressure and recognition instead of doubt. Because the right connection never makes you feel like you have to fight to be seen or force yourself to be chosen, the right connection arrives with confirmation in your spirit that this meeting was written long before you understood why your heart kept believing someone special was still ahead of you. And maybe there were moments when you almost settled for less just because the waiting felt heavy. Maybe there were times when loneliness tried to convince you that any connection would be better than no connection. But every time you stepped back instead of stepping into something that did not feel right, you were actually protecting the future God is preparing for you. And even though it did not feel powerful in that moment, it was one of the strongest spiritual decisions you could make. Because it kept your heart available for what is truly meant for you instead of tying it to something temporary that would have delayed your real story even longer. What you don't see yet is how many small details are being arranged right now in places you are not even looking, conversations being prepared, opportunities being aligned, locations being coordinated, moments being scheduled in ways that only God can design. And when those details finally connect together you will realize that what looked like randomness was actually precision, what looked like delay was actually direction. And what looked like silence was actually God moving quietly so that when the right moment arrived nothing would block what He already planned to bring into your life. Your future connection is not being forgotten, it is being formed, and the person meant to walk beside you is not lost somewhere in the world without purpose. They are moving through their own preparation season just like you are, learning lessons that will help them understand you better, developing strength that will help them support you better, and growing spiritually so that when your lives finally meet you are not strangers trying to figure everything out alone but two prepared hearts, stepping into something that already carries God's confirmation within it. So if today feels slow, if tonight feels quiet, if this season feels longer than you expected, remember that divine timing is not measured by how fast something appears but by how strong it becomes once it finally arrives, and the love that God is aligning for you is not late, it is being built carefully, intentionally, and faithfully in ways that will make sense one day when you finally look into the eyes of the person who was being prepared for you at the exact same time you were being prepared for them, even when neither of you knew the other's name yet. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to say is something most people never realize until much later in their story. The reason your heart still reacts when you hear certain words, the reason you still feel that quiet pull towards someone you haven't even met yet, the reason you keep sensing that love is coming even after disappointment tried to convince you it never would, is because God never creates a deep expectation inside a soul without already preparing the answer somewhere ahead of it, and while it may feel like silence right now, heaven is not silent at all. God is arranging conversations you haven't heard, protecting hearts you haven't touched yet, redirecting paths you didn't even know were dangerous, and shaping a future connection strong enough to survive the timing you once thought was too slow, because the love that is meant to stay in your life isn't built quickly, it's built carefully, intentionally, and spiritually so that when it finally arrives it doesn't confuse you, it confirms everything you secretly hoped was true. And this is why your waiting season has not been empty even though it felt lonely at times, because during this season God has been teaching your future partner how to recognize your value before they even see your face, teaching them how to respect your heart before they ever hear your voice, and teaching them how to choose you the right way instead of choosing you the easy way. And while you were learning patience, they were learning maturity. While you were learning trust, they were learning clarity. And while you were learning to release the wrong people, they were learning how not to become one of them, which means this separation you're experiencing right now is not distance, it's preparation, it's alignment, it's protection, and sometimes it's even rescue from connections that would have looked right but slowly broken something sacred inside you if they had arrived earlier than God allowed. Because timing in heaven doesn't work like timing on earth, and what feels delayed to you is often perfectly synchronized from God's perspective. And if you think about it honestly, the relationships that came too early in your life were never strong enough to carry the future you're stepping into now, which is exactly why God had to remove them before they became permanent mistakes instead of temporary lessons. And even though those endings hurt more than you expected, they quietly made space for someone who won't just enter your life but will understand it, support it, and protect it the way God intended from the beginning. And this is the moment where many people almost give up because they confuse waiting with rejection. But what you're experiencing is not rejection, it's refinement. It's preparation for a connection that doesn't just feel exciting but feels peaceful, steady, and spiritually safe, the kind of love that doesn't disappear when things become difficult but becomes stronger because both hearts involved were shaped by God before they were introduced to each other. And that's why something inside you still believes even when logic tells you to stop hoping. Because your spirit recognizes what your eyes haven't seen yet, and your faith is responding to a promise heaven is already moving toward you, which means the story you're walking through right now isn't empty space between chapters. It's the turning point where God begins bringing two journeys closer together without either person realizing how close they actually are to meeting. And when that moment finally happens, you won't feel confused, you won't feel uncertain, and you won't feel like you're forcing something to work, because the peace you feel will be your confirmation that this connection didn't begin by coincidence, it began with God. There is something happening behind the scenes of your life right now that you cannot see yet, but your spirit has already started to feel it, because God never delays a promise without preparing a moment that will feel so perfectly timed that one day you will look back at every night you cried, every message that never came, every relationship that ended without explanation, every door that closed in silence. And suddenly you will realize none of it was random, because heaven was protecting the chapter that was meant to introduce the person who would finally understand your heart without you needing to explain why it beats the way it does. And the truth is, the reason this waiting season has felt heavier than usual is because something spiritually significant is getting closer to you right now, and whenever destiny moves toward you, heaven always slows your steps so you don't miss what was meant to find you. God knows the exact moment your heart almost gave up believing in love again, and that was the same moment He started aligning someone else's path toward yours, even though neither of you could see it happening yet, because real alignment does not begin when two people meet, it begins when two hearts are quietly being shaped in separate places for the same future, and that means while you were learning patience, they were learning commitment. While you were healing from disappointment, they were learning loyalty. While you were asking God if love was still meant for you, they were asking God to prepare them to recognize you when the time finally came. And this is why your story has not followed the timeline you expected, because heaven never rushes what is meant to last. There is a reason your spirit keeps feeling like something is about to change even though nothing around you looks different yet, because transformation always begins invisibly before it becomes visible. And sometimes God allows silence to surround you, not because He forgot about your prayers but because He is answering them in a way that requires preparation instead of speed. And what you are stepping toward is not another temporary connection that fades when life gets complicated, but a connection strong enough to survive seasons you have not even entered yet, which is why your heart had to grow stronger before this person could step into your life. You may not realize it, but every time you chose healing instead of bitterness, you moved one step closer to the relationship God has been preparing for you. Every time you refused to chase someone who was not meant for you, heaven quietly redirected your future towards someone who will never make you question your worth. And every time you stayed faithful during loneliness, you proved to God that you were ready for something deeper than surface-level affection, because the love that is coming into your life will not confuse you, it will not disappear when things get difficult, and it will not require you to shrink who you are just to keep it. Right now there is someone somewhere praying for clarity about their future without realizing they are actually praying about you, asking God for peace about a relationship they have not entered yet, asking for confirmation about a connection they have not recognized yet, asking for strength to become the person they need to be for the one they are meant to love. And the beautiful part of this moment is that both of your prayers are rising at the same time, even though your lives have not crossed yet, which means heaven is already writing a conversation your hearts will one day understand without words. This waiting season has never been punishment, and it has never been rejection, even though it sometimes felt that way, because what God was really doing was removing people who could only walk with you temporarily, so the person meant to walk beside you permanently would have space to arrive without confusion or competition or emotional noise from your past. And when that moment happens, you will finally understand why certain doors closed so suddenly and why certain connections disappeared without explanation, because not every goodbye is a loss, sometimes it is protection dressed in silence. There is something powerful about the way God prepares two people separately before He brings them together, because when the meeting finally happens, it does not feel forced or rushed or uncertain. It feels familiar in a way that surprises your mind but comforts your spirit at the same time. And that is the kind of connection that does not need convincing, because it carries peace instead of pressure and clarity instead of confusion, and that peace is going to be the sign you have been waiting for. Even if you did not realize that was the sign your heart needed most. So if tonight you are wondering whether your story is still moving forward even though everything feels quiet right now, you need to understand that silence in God's timing is never empty space, it is preparation space. And the very fact that your heart still hopes even after everything it has experienced is proof that heaven is not finished writing your love story yet, because God never plants expectation inside someone unless He plans to fulfill something greater than what they imagined. And the truth is, you are closer than you think right now, even if nothing around you looks different yet, because destiny rarely announces itself loudly before it arrives. Sometimes it simply moves closer step by step until suddenly the moment you stopped expecting becomes the moment everything changes. There is something powerful happening behind the silence you are living in right now, and even though it feels like nothing is moving, heaven is actually rearranging people, places, conversations, and timing in ways your human eyes cannot yet recognize, because the love story God is preparing for you cannot arrive in confusion, cannot survive in chaos, and cannot grow in the wrong season, which is why the delay you are experiencing today is not a punishment, and it is not abandonment but protection. Preparation and positioning all happening at once, even if your heart sometimes questions why everyone else seems to be finding their person while you are still waiting and wondering when your turn will come. The truth is, God is not comparing your timeline with anyone else's timeline, because the relationship He is preparing for you carries a purpose deeper than romance and a calling bigger than emotion. And when something carries that level of meaning, heaven never rushes its arrival just to satisfy temporary loneliness, because temporary comfort has never been God's priority in your life. Eternal alignment has always been His plan from the beginning, and that is why some connections disappeared without explanation, why some people walked away without closure, and why some situations ended before they even had a chance to grow, because what felt like loss to you was actually heaven quietly removing what could not carry your future. And even now there are moments when you still wonder whether the right person exists, whether the prayers you whispered late at night were heard, whether the tears you hid from everyone else were seen. But what you must understand is that heaven records every silent prayer, even the ones you never finished speaking, and heaven answers them in ways that protect your heart long before you recognize the protection was necessary, because sometimes the person you thought you needed was never meant to stay in. Sometimes the delay you feared was actually the shield you prayed for without realizing it, and God knew that the love story written for you would require patience, maturity, healing, and clarity before it could begin, because real alignment cannot grow inside emotional confusion, and real connection cannot survive inside unfinished healing, which means this waiting season is not empty time. This waiting season is sacred preparation happening inside your spirit, even on the days when it feels like nothing is changing. And maybe you have noticed something shifting inside you recently. Maybe your standards are stronger now, maybe your faith is deeper now, maybe your peace is louder than your fear now, and maybe the things that once attracted you no longer feel right anymore. And that change did not happen by accident. That change happened because heaven has been preparing your heart for someone who matches your purpose, not just your emotions, because attraction alone cannot carry destiny, and feelings alone cannot sustain a covenant, but alignment created by God can survive storms, distance, misunderstanding, and time itself, which is why your story has been moving slowly, because heaven builds permanent things differently than temporary things. And what God is preparing for you is not temporary attention, not temporary excitement, and not temporary affection, but something steady, something safe, something intentional, something chosen, and something prayed for long before you even knew the person existed. And right now, somewhere, someone is also being prepared for you. Someone is also learning patience, someone is also healing from what they thought they wanted, someone is also praying for clarity without knowing they are praying toward you. And this is the mystery of divine timing, two hearts being shaped separately so they can recognize each other instantly when the moment arrives. Because when God writes a connection, He does not depend on coincidence, He depends on alignment. And when alignment happens, distance disappears, confusion fades, and recognition feels peaceful instead of complicated, which is why you must not lose hope in this season, even if the silence feels heavy, even if the waiting feels longer than expected, and even if the future still feels uncertain, because what heaven is arranging right now is bigger than what you can currently imagine and stronger than what fear is trying to convince you will never happen. And one day, very soon, you will look back at this exact season of waiting and realize it was never wasted time. It was the moment God was protecting your heart from what could not stay and preparing your life for someone who will not leave. And when that realization arrives, everything that once felt delayed will suddenly make perfect sense, because divine timing never explains itself in advance. It reveals itself only after alignment is complete, and that moment is closer than you think, even now, while you are still learning how to trust the process without seeing the outcome. Because faith always grows strongest in seasons where answers are quiet, but heaven is still working behind the scenes, preparing something your heart will finally recognize as worth the wait.